First of all, thank you very much for this invitation in Lisbon. I have been interested for a long time in interaction between mathematics and theoretical physics. A long time ago, for 12 years, I organized in Strasbourg a regular meeting between theoretical physicists and mathematicians, RCP 25 after Raymond Gérard. Okay. Okay, so the very general picture. So for me, in some sense, the beginning of the story is Grothendieck with the introduction of the schemes. And introducing of the schemes, then you get unification between classical algebraic geometry and arithmetic. And what I propose is to push forward this machinery and to extend this machinery to create new objects in order to add, in some sense, some complex analysis, more specifically classical special functions, hypergeometric functions, and so on, and also be one of my subjects, the Penway function, which can be considered by, in some sense, by the special function of this century. Okay, this is Heidi, and there are some strong evidence that there is a relation between this picture and some theory of theoretical physics. In this lack of time, in this mini course, I will almost not speak about the Galois theory. In fact, there are a lot of Galois theory on this in this picture. You have a classical algebraic theory, like in Grothendieck work, but there is also differential algebra theory introduced by Émile Picard at the end of 19th century. And there are also, you know, in this case, for instance, electrodynamics, you have divergent power series, and the coefficient of this, after a normalization, the coefficient of this series has special numbers. You can write that using periods. And there is also an hypothetic Galois group of periods, so it's another Galois group. And also in the associated to the normalization, you have another Galois group who was introduced by Alain Kohn and Mathilde Marcolli, and which is related to what I will explain about exponential torus. So there are many interlacing Galois groups, but I will not speak, unfortunately, of that. So in fact, it's a big continent with emerging just from the mist. Okay, so in the mini course, I will illustrate this idea by very simple examples. First of all, extremely simple examples, apparently, and also a little more complicated example, that is the family of Penway equation. Okay, so about Penway equation, in fact, I will use also very old 19th century classical algebraic geometry, but in a way apparently new, as far as I know, about what I call wild geometry. I will not introduce abstractly the very heavy machinery. It's possible, but it's too complicated, so I will try to give the main ideas. Okay. An important fact is that I will give more precise definition. I will speak of asymptotics. Asymptotics were created at the end of 19th century by Henri Poincaré. And as I will explain, Poincaré has had some ideas rooted in differential equations, in ordinary differential equations, and later in his work he discovered a relation with celestial mechanics. more complicated world. And Poincaré has some ideas, but Poincaré asymptotic, in fact, don't reflect the deep ideas of Poincaré, as I explained. And there is a problem. Okay, so I will shift from Poincaré, but in fact, if you read carefully Poincaré, the ideas were already, main ideas were already in his work. Okay, about some introduction, short introduction about Painlevé equation. Discovered this equation in an effort of classification of second-order algebraic differential equation in the complex domain. At that time, everybody was clear about first-order differential equation. And the next step, of course, was second-order equation, rational second-order equation. And Painlevé work with what is called today Painlevé properties. That is, there is no, the only possible movable singularity of the solutions are poles. I don't know, I think it was related to the work of, perhaps related to the work of Sofia Kowalewska on the top. And my feeling is that perhaps the first idea was coming from Weierstrass, but I am not sure. And according to Painlevé and Gambier, such a student Gambier, this equation can be reduced to a list of 50 equations. And if you exclude already known equations, it remains essentially 6 equations. And here are the famous Painlevé equations, the 6 equations. Apparently, the simplest is the first one, and the more complicated is the 6th equation. But in fact, it's the contrary. The simplest equation is 6, in some sense, is equation 6, this one. In fact, P6 was not discovered by Painlevé and Gambier, but the first discovery is due to Richard Fuchs, the son of Lazarus Fuchs. And it was not discovered in relation with Painlevé property, but in relation with isomorphic some deformation. I will explain later, some deformation of linear differential equation. It's completely different. And in 1919, Garnier discovered that, in fact, also the other Painlevé equation can be defined using the same trick. And the equivalence between the 2 points of view is perhaps a miracle. It's due because you work with second-order equation. For third-order equation and so on, it doesn't work. In one sense, it's okay. All the differential equations coming from isomorphic deformation, they possess the Painlevé property, the theorem, rigorous theorem due to independently to Malgrange and Miroir. I think the equation was forgotten and the subject was rediscovered and received new impulsion at the beginning of the 80s. In fact, perhaps 2 currents, I will explain. 2 converging currents. And after that, the subject explodes. There are an enormous number of papers for mathematics in relation with physics and so on. There is really a lot of paper, a lot of techniques. It's a maze. So I will try to explain perhaps what I think are the main ideas, how to cross the techniques. I will not explain everything. In particular, I will will speak of symplectic properties, but I think Philippe will explain that in many details. Okay. So if you want to study Painlevé equations, there are a priori two completely different lines. The first one is in fact, is following Painlevé himself, following the the leçon de Stockholm of PNV is it's a world of holomorphic dynamical system, holomorphic foliation, and so on. So you start from the Poincaré, Dulac, PNV. The main tools are blow-up, ramified blow-up. These ramified blow-up were introduced by Briot and Bouquet and then forgotten, and recently they are used by a young Japanese mathematician, Shiba. And formal normal forms, as the work was in Poincaré, the beginning of the story. Analytic normal form, also in Poincaré, and in special wild case, I began with Martinez some years ago, invariant subspace, summability, and so on, and the resurgence theory of Jean Ricard. So, an essential breakthrough in this line is the work of Okamoto. I don't know exactly the date, I don't remember, which began in Strasbourg, and then the impulsion of Raymond Gérard. So you will explain later is the problem of Okamoto space of initial condition. Okay, so this is one side. And the other technique is to start from Richard Fuchs' work, that is to use the notion of deformation of linear equation. So you consider each PNV equation as a deformation to an associate linear differential equation. And the main historical source as the beginner is Richard Fuchs, and afterwards is René Garnier. And Schlesinger and so on. And the story, new impulse, a new impulse is 80 by Sato School and so on other people. So you have Lax pairs, character varieties, generalized Mondromi data, wild Mondromi representation, and so on. Just a parenthesis, I have introduced the name wild because it's related to what I explained at the beginning. At the very beginning is like if you look at a Grothendieck work, you have special cases arithmetic, you have classical Galois theory, polynomials, and in classical Galois theory, when you work in positive characteristic, you have special phenomena. So and the analysis of a Galois group, you have two components. You have the tame things and you have the wild things. And which are this P is a characteristic is related to the P silos. Okay? And in fact, there is a very strong analogy between the P silos and what I will describe later, that is the exponential torus. So the existence of exponential torus, for me, it's reasonable to call that wild by analogy with P silos. Okay, and in this approach, the main, very important main heuristic principle is that all the asymptotic of the true solution of a PNV equation are parametrized. You look at the asymptotics at each singular point, and in some sense they are parametrized by the monodromy data for P6 and the generalized monodromy data for the other PNV equations. Okay, so I will begin by very, very extremely simple but interesting differential equations. After that, I will speak the Okamoto space, introduce character varieties, isomodromic information, and after that, the dynamics of P6. Dynamic of P6 is what you get, you know, P6 you have a free singular point, 0, 1, infinity, and you look at the nonlinear monodromy of this. And this nonlinear monodromy give you dynamics on the Okamoto space of solutions. Okay, so these examples are very simple, but they are the basic bricks. And in some sense, if you understand very well this extremely simple, then you can build all the theory from these bricks. So I began with this equation. I look only rational differential equation, that is equation on P1. Of course, you write this, you can take rational function. Of course, it's sufficient, multiplying by a polynomial is sufficient to take polynomial functions. And then you can write this differential operator. And this differential operator is in this ring. Of course, this ring is non-commutative. It's a difference with the classical geometry. And it was, in fact, the study of such non-commutative rings began with Einstein-Ore in the 30s. It's a non-commutative version of the planar algebraic geometry. After that, it was called theory of D modules. And it was first introduced, in fact, by Malgrange in exposé in Séminaire Bourbaki in Paris. But it was developed later in the 70s by Bernstein, Sato, Kawai, Kashiwara. And of course, you can, there is a commutative version, and this commutative version is related to symplectic geometry. Of course, you have to look also at infinity with the change of variables, and then you have the singular point. And an important elementary but a very important property is that they are fixed singularity. If you know the equation, you know the singularity. So the solutions, they can have singularity only at this point. Okay, so if you take a non-singular point, you have a fundamental system of solution by Cauchy, and you can extend along any continuous path. And if you do loop, if you turn around a singular point, then it induces a linear automorphism of the space of solution. It's called the monodromy isomorphism. It is dependent only of the homotopy class of the path. So you get, it depends only of an element of the fundamental group. Okay. And for linear differential equations, the story is not so simple. In fact, there are two types of singular points. There are the regular singular point, and this point was completely understood at the end of 19th century. And but there are also the irregular singularities. And in fact, I think the study of the systematic study of irregular singularity began with Poincaré. He was very young, it was at the time of his thesis. But it was very partial, so it took a long time, and this regular singularity were completely understood only during the 80s. Okay, so I began with extremely simple examples. So you explain later what is the hierarchy. So I began with, you know, I think in terms of scales. So you have different scales, and so the first scale is a logarithmic scale in some sense. So I began with the logarithm. So this is this equation. Okay. And the space of the solution, the measure like that. So the space of solution is this one. And if you look at the linear equation second order, if you do a monodromy loop around the origin, then the monodromy matrix is this one. And the important point is that it's extremely elementary but important. The important point is that it is unipotent. Later you will see, you will find a semi-simple matrix and unipotent matrix. So unipotent matrix will come on one side for the logarithm, on the other side from something from Stokes phenomena. So in some sense, logarithm is some analogy between logarithm and Stokes phenomena. Okay, the second actor is this one. Okay. It is one-dimensional, and the monodromy is multiplication by this complex number. And now I am mainly interested in second order equations, so you can put two equations like that together with this operator D. Okay, and then you have two cases. You have the classical case, and the space of solution is like that, superposition of these two spaces. But you have also this resonance case. And in this resonance case, you have apparition of the logarithm. Okay, so here you have the Morodromis. So this is the local situation. And it is the simplest case of local situation. But now if you look function equation is a more general case for the local situation, you can understand what is happening. It's complicated, but there are explicit algorithms. You can compute everything. And you can understand everything using these two results. And after that, you have to put together different singular points. Another story. Okay, so here you have the definition of regular singular point. It's a question of poles, it's like that. And otherwise, it is an irregular singularity. Okay, there are, of course, evident generalizations for equation of order n, but I will mainly speak of equation of order 2 today. Okay, and now I arrive to an example of irregular singular equation. Also, this example seems very simple. It's not so simple, and if you, for me, it's really the basic brick of all the theory of irregular equation. And also, the story is the same. Locally, if you have understood the regular equation, and then if you add this equation and variant of this equation conjugating by ramification and so on, it's possible to put the things together and to understand all the local theory. So it's extremely important to understand all the aspects of these examples. So the first things to look is formal solutions. Why formal solution? Why formal? Because, as I will explain, the solutions are no longer convergent. In the regular singular case, is a theorem, all the formal solution, power series solution, which appear in the solutions, they automatically converge. But when you have irregular equation, it's no longer the case. Some series, in general, the series are divergent. So this is the first example. So in this example, it's also possible to understand what are Poincaré asymptotics and what are the motivation of Poincaré. Afterwards, I will explain on this exam that the Poincaré asymptotics are not so good, and it's better to replace what is called Poincaré Gevrey asymptotics. And this, following the path of Gevrey asymptotic, you arrive to the concept of one-summability. This one-summability is related to Borel-Laplace, the classical Borel-Laplace summation invented by Emile Borel. This business also is related to summation, what Poincaré called at the beginning of Mécanique Céleste, what Poincaré called summation in the sense of astronomers. It is a fact that you can take this divergent series, you look at the modulus of general term, and the modulus of general term is doing like that, it's going down, and then it explodes. And you look, it's going down, you cut at the point at the smallest term, and you add this number of terms, and you get a numerical value. And practically, in many problems of celestial mechanics, it's very good. So it's also very good in quantum electrodynamics and so on. And so Poincaré remarks that, but he gave no explanation. So I will propose an explanation. It's related to Gevrey asymptotics. Okay, and later in other lecture, I will explain that what is this case also is a prototype of saddle node singularity foliations. One of the important basic cases of singularity of foliation. Okay, so the first step is to search, and that's a formal power series solution of the equation. And then you get a unique solution that is the Euler series. Euler was interested in this De Seriebus divergentibus in the 18th century. He was interested in this series because he was interested in the Wallis series, that is, you put x equal 1 in this, and you get numerical series, divergent numerical series. And Euler was interested in he wanted to give a notion of sum he was thinking all, and in some sense it's reasonable, but I have no time to explain why. And he gives four processes of computation of the sum of the series, and one of the process of Euler is this one, is using the differential equation, what I call Euler differential equation. Okay. And then the general formal solution of the Euler equation is this one. You have this formal power series, and then it appears an exponential. So you will see the general structure of solution of irregular differential equations. In irregular, when you write the solution of linear differential equations, you have to use some ansatz. You put in the machinery, formally you put x to the power alpha, logarithm, power series, perhaps the variant power series, and also exponential. So it's exponential 1 over x. In general, it will be exponential of a polynomial in 1 over x, or in fact, polynomial in a ramification of 1 over x. Okay, but the general philosophy is the same. And very important, a very simple but extremely important actor is that if you look at such solutions, then you can in some sense, will not detail, but there is a Galois differential Galois group acting on this solution. And in this differential Galois group, there is a very special component, what I call exponential torus. Is essentially you take the exponential and you multiply by an arbitrary non-zero complex number. So it is an action of C star, an action of the torus. I call that exponential torus. So exponential torus is an action on the solution by rescaling of the exponential. And of course, you can do that in the general case. You write the formal solution. You look at the exponential appearing in the formal solution, and then you rescale. And of course, there are some relations. There are some algebraic relations with the polynomial of exponential, and you have to take account of that in the torus to do some quotient. Okay, I will not formalize, but it is the idea. Okay, so this now you look at the homogeneous version, and then you get a linear homogeneous second order equation. It is a special case of the Kummer confluent hypergeometric function. I will explain later. Okay, so now the second, I finish with the formal solution. The second step is asymptotic solution. And of course, you can do like Euler. Euler was working only in the real domain, but it's the same. You can write the method of variation of constants. You can do some manipulation. And you get this integral formula for the actual solution, which is in the Euler paper. So if you change a little bit the variable, it's a Laplace transform. So this one is the Laplace transform of 1 over 1 plus t. Okay. So then I cut at order n, I get a polynomial, And then I get also rest. So I write the actual solution like that, a polynomial and the rest. And then it's possible to estimate the remaining term. It is in Euler paper, like that. And I can do the same in the complex domain, and I get such estimates. And according to Poincaré definition, I get an asymptotic expansion, that is polynomial and such a rest with some constant here. And in Poincaré definition, this constant here is completely arbitrary. It's uniform on each closed subsector, but the constants depend of the subsectors. In Poincaré, there is nothing more. The constant is completely arbitrary, and it is a big problem. Okay, so this is the formal definition of Poincaré asymptotic, and my notation is like that. Here you have the Taylor map. So you start from an holomorphic sector on a solution on a sector, and you associate a formal power series expansion. And in general, it can be divergent. An important point is that it is surjective. So you know, a Poincaré asymptotic is something. It looks like, in fact, it's a holomorphic function, but it looks like infinite functions. Smooth. Some smoothness. But you pay this surjectivity, you pay by the fact that the kernel is not real. The kernel is function which are holomorphically flat at the origin, and this function, you don't see this function on the asymptotic expansion. Okay, now an important result, a very important result about the application of the theory, Poincaré theory asymptotic expansions to ordinary differential equation. In fact, it was the first idea of Poincaré. You know, Poincaré invented asymptotic expansion in his study of linear differential equations in the complex domain. Okay, this is a quote of Pierre Deligne. Pierre thinks that this theorem is essential. And this theorem says that starting from a formal solution of an algebraic ODE, linear or not, you can represent it asymptotically in Poincaré sense by an actual solution on a sufficiently small sector, small in small radius and small opening. But you can choose arbitrarily the bisecting line of the sector. Okay, this is the formal version of the theorem. In fact, it's possible to, you know, knowing the equation, parenthesis missing, looking the equation, in fact, the theorem is more precise. There is a number will say you something about the possible opening of the sector. So the story began with the work of Poincaré. Poincaré proves some result for generic special case. And after Poincaré, a lot of people work on this equation and propose improvements of this theorem. In fact, even for a long time, even after my work with Shibuya, people propose new proof, in general, false proof. You know, it's not, in fact, it's not so easy. The general, if you want really the theorem without any restrictive hypothesis, it's not really not easy. The idea is very simple. It's fixed point method, Picard fixed point method. But the problem is the domain. The domain to choose the domain for apply the fixed point methods, and the form of this domain is very complicated because you know for the estimate you have to move the path of integration. You have to apply more or less saddle methods, And then you have to find domain in order that you can move nicely the path of integration. And that is really extremely complicated. Okay, so the proof is in this paper, paper 1989. It's possible to compute a minoration of this constant k using a Newton polygon algorithm. I did that for linear equation, and later Malgrange for nonlinear equation. Okay, so you know, of course, that the Power series is convergent, the sum is the actual solution. So what happens when the series is divergent? And then it's possible to do better the asymptotic. It's possible to, starting from a divergent actual solution, to build an explicit actual solution by process of summation. Okay, I will give some hints later. So in general, in the generic case, what I call K-summability works, and for Pelvé case is sufficient. For the really the degenerate case, in the general case, it is more complicated and you need what we call multisummability. Yeah, it's quite complicated. Okay, so you know, if you start from Poincaré definition, you have this problem that you have in some sense some possible error in your estimate with holomorphic exponentially flat function. And the space of holomorphic infinitely flat function is enormous. So it's a real problem. And there is a way to skip, in some sense, the problem if you replace the Poincaré asymptotic with what I call Gevrey asymptotic. I discovered this exponentic in 1978. In fact, they were introduced by George Watson at the beginning of the 20th century, 1911. And George Watson discovered this new definition. He was a very young mathematician and very interesting papers. But at that time, it seems that almost everybody says it's not interesting, stupid. So after that, I think Watson forgot that, he did other things. I think he was not so happy. And this was forgotten for a long time. Okay, so the idea is to modify the Poincaré definition, replacing the arbitrary estimate constant by more precise estimates. Estimates relate to the factorial n, to some power. Okay, so the C is arbitrary, but you have a constant A and a constant S. Of course, they can depend on the subsector. The basic example, of course, is F hat, Euler series, is the Gevrey-Owen asymptotic expansion of this actual solution, this estimate I showed you before. Okay, and now you have the Gevrey power series, like that. In fact, the Gevrey power series, I named that Gevrey because they were introduced the beginning of the 20th century. They were introduced by Maurice Gevrey for PDEs, for parabolic PDEs, heat equation and things like that.
What is the example?
Heat equation. The example is, excuse me. The example is this one. You take this function, it admits this power series as Gevrey-Owen expansion. Okay, you have this control of the rest, you know. You have this control of the rest. Oof. I am slow. Sorry. Okay. And now there is an essential difference between the two notions of asymptotics. There is a dichotomy. if you have small sectors, the condition is like that, then the map is surjective. It's like Poincaré asymptotic. And you have a kernel. But if your sector is sufficiently big, and then you get unicity in some sense, that is the kernel now is 0, but the map is no longer surjective. The image has something special. And the series in the image, I name that one summable series. Okay, so if you use these asymptotics, on big sector, you have a notion of exact sum. For Poincaré, for Euler series, the exact sum is the integral. And the notion of sum is directional, it's dependent on the direction. So you have a notion of summability in a direction. Of course, a series summable in all the directions is convergent. When a series is summable in all the directions except a finite double, I will say it is K-summable. And then there is something quite subtle. If you look at summability for different K, there is something strange. Your series cannot be summable for different K. If it is summable for different K, there is a Tauberian theorem, it's automatically convergent. You have a problem with the phases and the amplitude. It's something like Heisenberg principle, and also something similar with prime numbers in arithmetic. Okay, so Euler series is one summable because, of course, it's one summable in the direction R plus. It is a result of Euler. But you can also move the integration contour. You can replace R plus by a line, a half line starting from the origin. You can choose an arbitrary half line. The forbidden direction is R minus because of this. T equal minus 1 is forbidden. But the holomorphic sums like that, they glue together by analytic continuation. And you get a function with the holomorphic on the open sector on the ramified surface of logarithms opening 3p. And is Geoffroy asymptotic in all these sectors. And of course, because the opening is 3p, the function has two branches in this domain. Excuse me, minus Rx less than 0. And that you have two branches, and you can compare the integral, you can compare the two branches, you can compute the difference by a residue formula, and you get an exponential terms. And on the left half plane, this exponential term is small, it's exponentially small. So you have, when you cross R minus, you have an exponential jump in the solution. This is the Stokes phenomena. And so I call R minus a Stokes line. Stokes line is where the solution, where happen an exponentially small jump. So be careful, because in the literature some people call that anti-Stokes lines. So there is a confusion between Stokes lines and anti-Stokes lines. So I will not detail, but and it remains a lot of distinguished people stuck to this misunderstanding of Stokes' work. It's not a good word towards summability and resurgence. It's my opinion. Okay, now some words about Borel-Laplace summation. So it was introduced by Émile Borel. You start from a Geoffroy series. You renormalize it in some sense. You divide by this factorial. And you get a new power series. And of course, by hypothesis, this one is convergent. It gives you a function in the small disk. in the what is named the Borel plane, the plane, complex plane of zeta. We extend by this definition, and it's already in Borel. This operator transforms multiplication into convolution. So multiplication is local, convolution is global. And in the other way, if you start from a function in the zeta plane, you do this hypothesis. You suppose that this holomorphic function extends analytically along a line with an utmost exponential growth at infinity. If it is the case, it's not always the case, but if it is the case, you can define a Laplace transform in a direction d, and you get an actual function. And you will say that it is Borel summable in this direction, and that this guy is its sum in the direction d. And now you have a fundamental theorem, that is my one summability and Borel, the whole Borel-Laplace summability are equivalent. It's very nice because, you know, it was people were against this paper of Watson because they say if this Laplace-Borel transform is very complicated. You cannot prove that if you have, I give you a formal power series expansion, you cannot prove that it is Borel-Laplace summable. In general, it's quite difficult. But if you use this theorem, then you can replace the existence of this Borel-Laplace transform business by this property of existence algebra asymptotic on big sector. It's not evident, but this one in the application is very easy to prove because, for example, for application to dynamical systems, it can be proved by essentially by two tricks, cohomological tricks and linearization. And it's not evident, but it's quite easy. In many, many cases, it's quite easy to prove summability or k-summability. And then you use the equivalence, and you get a formula. Okay, just some word. Now you can use boundary values, but I will not detail. Perhaps you use boundary values. You have some examples. And now a fundamental trick, which is at the basis of Ekal work. Fundamental trick is to replace this integral. By the integral on R minus of the boundary value. It's very simple, but it's the beginning of the resurgence. It's a basic break of alien derivation. The idea is, very roughly speaking, the idea is that you perform a Borel transformation, you get an holomorphic function on the Borel plane, and then you try to extend along a path. And what happens in many applications to dynamical systems is that you can do that avoiding some singular point which have above some lattice. You can do that, and then you will look at the solution which are above the lattice. Then at each point, then you can take a variant of the boundary value. And this business is the beginning of resurgence theory. Now I have explained you what are locally regular singular point. And then you can try to globalize the things. And when you try to do that, you have the simplest possible example and are the hypergeometric equation. Okay, and the important fact for me is that you can associate an hypergeometric equation, a representation of the free group generated by of rank 2. And there is a dictionary between the hypergeometric equation and purely algebraic objects that is in the world of representation. And there are confluent versions. Okay. So I will find that later for Palmway equations. Okay. So I recall very briefly, everybody knows. So I start with a hypergeometric series like that. And this series appears when you want to solve this function, regular singular differential equation. Okay. For example, at the origin, you have these four formal solutions. You have a ramification and this hypergeometric series. So you can compute the homodromy around this origin. It's semi-simple like that. Generically, it's semi-simple. Okay, and then you have two free singularities, 0, 1, infinity, and you have two loops with this relation. You have the table of homodromy exponent, and it can be generalized like that. So you can reduce the general case to this case, like Riemann. Okay, and now you have two cases. You have the simple case of irreducible representation. And this one is quite easy. You have this condition of irreducibility. And then you can, in that case, you can compute the representation knowing two matrices, only two matrices. You can get the other. Be careful. Up to conjugation. Okay, so you can compute everything. It was done by Riemann, and so Riemann gives formulae using exponential or trigonometric functions. If you want to be more precise, if you want to compute the homodromy in this hypergeometric basis at this origin, trigonometric functions are not sufficient. You need gamma functions. Okay, and now next actor is the confluent version, this one. The idea is to take one and put it to infinity. And here you have a formal fundamental system of solution. You see the apparition of exponential here. And here you have divergent series. But there are one summable. Generically, there you have two Stokes lines. You know, for Euler series, it's exceptional because you have only one Stokes line. In general, you have two. And the confluence is like that. You replace z by t over b, and you take the limit b goes to the infinity. It's a fundamental mechanism that you will see also for Painlevé equations. Okay, I will skip that. Okay, now the fundamental idea is the wild homodromy of the confluent hypergeometric equation. So you have what I call the wild homodromy group representation. So first you have the Stokes multipliers. I have not explained, but you can compute them using Euler formula or Barnes integral formula. And you have this Stokes multiplier here. So you have these unipotent Stokes matrices. You have what I name the formal homodromy, that you take the formal solution and you perform a formal turn. Okay, and you get this transformation. And of course, you have the actual homodromy, and the actual homodromy is the product of the formal homodromy and the Stokes phenomena. The idea is that some loops, the actual homodromy is a loop very near of the origin, very, very near. And then when you go out, you have also two paths around Stokes, and exterior you get the actual homodromy. So it is what I call the wild homodromy group. So you will see later that there are similar things. There are similar things for all the linear differential equations. It's a little bit complicated, but it works perfectly. And I will explain later that there exists something similar for Painlevé equation. Oh, this I have to skip. Okay, and I go now to nonlinear equation to be a little faster. So the first idea is that when you are in the nonlinear world, you have a movable singularity. Okay, you have movable pole, movable branch point, movable logarithmic point, movable essential singular point. This is a new ingredient appearing with the nonlinear equation. So for nonlinear, you have movable singularities and fixed singularity, like in the linear world. Okay, and then the problem of Penway was to find all the algebraic differential equations free of movable branch point. This is Penway property. Okay, so for equation of order 2, the problem was solved by Penway-Gambier, and this is the answer. Perhaps I will skip that. Okay, and the first fundamental theorem is this one. If you first order equation, the Penway property, in some sense, is nothing new. It can be reduced by some transformation to Riccati equation, elliptic equation, or algebraic integration. Excuse me. Okay, so what the first interesting step is order 2, and the answer I show you is this list of Penway equations. Okay, now I will begin to, 5 minutes, I will begin to speak of P6. Before speaking of P6, I will speak of representation of the free group of rank 3 into SL2. So I start with this group. Okay, I look at such a representation. I look at the image of the generators. I denote EL and EL minus 1, the eigenvalues. And the representation can be identified with this list of three matrices. Now if you look at the representation, modulo equivalence of representation. Okay, this one doesn't exist. So you look up to overall conjugation. And this one is, of course, a complex variety, affine variety of dimension 9. And to representation, we can associate what is called trace coordinate. You look at the trace. First, you look at the trace, these parameters, this brown parameter. Essentially, they are local parameters. It's associated to local monodromy. And then you have, in some sense, global parameters when you turn around two singularities. And I will take that as this blue. I will take that traces as that as coordinates. Then you have 7 coordinates, and they satisfy that is so-called this freak relation. By manipulation and relation between traces, you can compute this cubic polynomial, and these parameters, you can compute them with the local parameters using this formula. The equivalent by construction by equivalence or representation. Then you get an algebraic map from this one to the space of representation to a 6-dimensional quartic hypersurface of C7 defined by this equation. And now I can fix the parameter A, and then I get a cubic surface. So you can interpret that as a family of cubic surface. And then the equivalence class of irreducible representation is completely determined by 7 free coordinates. So you have the irreducible case, you have a good dictionary between the family, the equivalence class of representation and the cubic surface. For reducible case, it's more complicated. You can take the projective completion, and I will explain later. This family contains all the smooth projective cubic surface up to linear transformation. And later I will explain for all the other Penway equation, I need also to look at singular cubic surface, and we'll explain that later. Okay. And here you have the non-smooth case, the exceptional case. You have either this property, that is reducibility here, see, or global reducibility of the representation. So these are the non-generic cases. Okay, here you have an example of a singular cubic surface, the Cayley cubic, this one. Okay, I will finish with that. So now it was abstract. It was representation of free group of rank 3. But I can replace this, if I want, I can replace this free group of rank 3 by the fundamental group of a 4-puncture sphere. It's like that. Okay. So I can apply the preceding result to the study of equivalence class of representation of the 4-puncture sphere. Okay. Okay, so here you have this space of representation. Okay, and I will finish with that. For small change of t, this group remains constant in some sense. There you have canonical isomorphism, because you get canonical isomorphism of space of representation. Okay, so geometrically, this says that the space of representation can be interpreted as a local system of variety parameterized by this point. You have a connection. Okay, so perhaps I will stop today with this picture of what is called Pant decomposition of the puncture sphere.